Good afternoon. This is All About Bitcoin, a show dedicated to all things questions and markets related to Bitcoin, little b for the currency, and Bitcoin, big B for the network. A collective journey to understand, apply, and use this innovation, all Bitcoin, all the time. And I'm your host, Kristin Lee. And taking a look at the XVX Bitcoin price right now, trading at about $58,244. Bitcoin is down slightly, about 1.1% according to TradeBlock data. The XVX has been the most reliable Bitcoin reference price for institutions since 2014, with billions in assets under management benchmarked against it. And looking at our top stories for today, Coinbase and Bakkt are behind Paul Tudor Jones's Bitcoin bets, according to SEC filings. Last May, we learned the billionaire hedge fund manager sunk 1 to 2% of his firm's $44.5 billion assets into Bitcoin, but it was unclear how. Well, now we know. Coinbase and Bakkt are providing custodial services to Tudor Jones's family hedge fund. Meanwhile, the Sacramento Kings are set to become the first major sports franchise to offer a Bitcoin payment option to all players and staff, according to team owner Vivek Ranadive on Clubhouse Monday. It's not their first foray into Bitcoin. The NBA team began selling everything from tickets to hot dogs for BTC in 2014 through BitPay. And finally, Fidelity, Square, Coinbase, and Crypto Investor Paradigm are launching a Bitcoin trade group, according to the Wall Street Journal. The Crypto Council for Innovation will lobby Congress, conduct research projects, and serve as a voice for the digital asset industry as regulations continue to take shape. And our first guest has been praised as crypto's original voice on Capitol Hill. Joining us now is Blockchain Association Executive Director Kristin Smith in Washington, D.C. Welcome, Kristin.
Hi, Christine. It's great to be back.
Great to have you again. Always a pleasure. All right, Kristin, so we're hearing this news about Coinbase, Square, and Fidelity joining forces. They are going to create this pro-crypto trade group. What was your reaction to this news when you heard it this morning?
I think this is very welcome news. I think that having mainstream financial institutions, along with the biggest players in the crypto space, working on policy advocacy is a huge step forward. And I think that policymakers will receive more established financial institutions in the space as very good news. So we're very excited about it. We welcome them to long sort of established history of crypto advocacy that's been going on in DC. But yes, I think this is an important milestone.
And you may have worked with Coinbase or Fidelity in the past, have you? And do you plan to work closely together going forward with this new trade group?
Yes, absolutely. I spoke with some of the folks behind CCI this morning, and we have already set up regular communications between the two organizations. I think as somebody who's spent about 10 years in government, it's incredibly important for the industry to have the same messaging when speaking with government. For those in government that don't know the nuances of the industry, it's very problematic when you're hearing two different messages and then policymakers become paralyzed because they don't know who to believe and who to trust. But there have been a lot of groups that have been doing a lot of great work in DC for a long time. Coin Center, which represents an independent voice, has been operating in Washington for about 6 years. They're incredibly well respected. Blockchain Association has been around for almost 3 years. We've got most of the crypto native organizations that are working well together, coming up with positions and then successfully advocating those positions. And so I think having these larger mainstream financial institutions teaming up is a welcome addition, and we look forward to collaborating with them and amplifying the messages that we need to win.
So, Kristin, you guys provide a very key voice for the crypto, for the blockchain industry on Capitol Hill. I wonder what your priorities are heading into this legislative session.
Yeah, well, we have both legislative and regulatory priorities. I think our biggest priority right now is the Financial Action Task Force, which is a international regulatory coordinating body, has proposed a regulatory framework that would be very problematic for decentralized networks. And so we are working with the Treasury Department and with FinCEN to see we can change of that document. We're also very eager to get Gary Gensler confirmed to the SEC and get key people in place at the SEC or at the OCC and the CFTC. And on the Hill, there's a tremendous amount of interest in stablecoins and banking charters and helping to find the right regulatory framework. So our team has our work cut out for itself, and glad to have more players join forces.
It's funny you mentioned FATF because I recall reading something about they're the final boss for the crypto industry.
Yeah.
You mentioned Gary Gensler he's awaiting Senate confirmation to become the next SEC chair. Will the next administration be more informed or perhaps more pro-innovation?
It's a little bit remains to be seen. I think under the last administration, we had, some pretty strong enemies at certain points, whether it be, the then chair of the SEC or the Treasury Secretary. But we also had great champions with the acting controller of the currency. So I think as we look to the Biden administration, we'll probably see a more measured approach. I think that we are going to have some advocates, and we have, I think, a fantastic group over at FinCEN right now that very much understands the industry. I think we have good people in place in the acting capacity at the CFTC. And I think having Gary Gensler, who understands the value of these networks in a position, is going to lead to more productive dialogue and, more in-depth regulatory conversation. So I have a positive outlook for the Biden administration.
You mentioned enemies from the Trump administration. During that time, there was the, reporting requirements rule on crypto transactions from exchanges to private wallets that was proposed. There was a lot of public outcry against these rules. The comment period is over. Do you see these rules moving forward?
FinCEN, which is the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network, is the agency responsible for this rulemaking. And they have, I think, taken a much more thoughtful approach in the Biden administration than we saw in kind of the last days of the Trump administration. And I do think ultimately they will move forward, but they have a lot of other priorities on their plate, including some statutory deadlines from new legislation that was passed in other areas related to money laundering. So I don't think that we're going to see particularly quick action, but I think when we do see action, it will be much more thoughtful approach. And so we're eager to continue to work for them. But I think the other point that I want to make is that, crypto got a big win. We had a major challenge that came through with this midnight rulemaking that would have been detrimental to the industry. But crypto won because it was an all hands on deck situation. Everyone worked together. You had multiple organizations, whether it be us, Coin Center, our friends at Fight for the Future, and as well as individuals within companies. And we came together and we worked together really well. And I think that has laid the foundation for, the larger group of advocates and lobbyists and policy thinkers that we now have with us with this new group today.
Just one quick question, if I could. There was some proposed legislation out there about stablecoins, requiring stablecoins like Diem in mind, a project formerly known as Libra, led by Facebook, to be issued by banks and banks only, and not tech companies. And the concern from lawmakers is that they don't want tech companies to have all this financial control on top of personal data. Yet the top stablecoins out there have been issued by tech companies. So, of course, there has been a lot of disagreement over this bill. Do you think that bill will go forward? Does it show a misunderstanding of the technology among policymakers?
Yeah, I think that does show a misunderstanding. And we've had a lot of dialogue with the offices on Capitol Hill that were behind that bill last Congress. The Stable Act has not yet been reintroduced this Congress. It's our sense that it is not the top priority at this time. And I think partially that is due to, a better understanding of how stablecoins work. And also, I think that Diem or Libra or whatever we're calling it these days isn't as prominent in the headlines. So I think that helps as well. So it's something we're keeping our eye on, but I don't see that as an immediate threat for introduction, but certainly don't see it as a threat for moving forward in the legislative process.
Kristin, always a pleasure having you on the show. Very informative, and good luck going forward, Hill.
Yep, likewise. Thanks, Christine. Good to catch up.
Yep. All right. That was Blockchain Association Executive Director Kristin Smith. Coming up, a look at Bitcoin's dominance and the crypto market's $2 trillion market cap with CoinDesk Director of Data and Indexes, Galen Moore.
The chart of the day is brought to you by Crypto.com, the world's fastest growing crypto app.
All right, Bitcoin is lagging today, but altcoins are taking off. This week, we saw the crypto market surpass $2 trillion in market cap, Bitcoin at about $1.1 trillion of that, accounting for a little more than half of the total market cap. This chart shows that Bitcoin's dominance relative to altcoins, which is nearing a 2-year low. In the red, we see the quarterly low, which is Bitcoin's minimum dominance for that quarter. And joining us now to discuss is CoinDesk Director of Data and Indexes, Galen Moore in Boston. Welcome, Galen.
Thank you, Christine. Happy to be here.
Always a pleasure to have you. All right, so we see global stocks are up, mixed results in the US, the Dow slightly down. Bitcoin is also down, but altcoins are soaring. So walk us through this chart and tell us how it adds to the picture, Galen.
Sure. So Bitcoin dominance is one of these esoteric metrics that's often used and discussed in the crypto world. Bitcoin being the original crypto asset and everything else being an alternative to Bitcoin or an altcoin. So what percentage of the global market cap of Bitcoin, of crypto assets, is occupied by Bitcoin? And as you laid out just a minute ago, it's at a 2-year low. So far, we're kind of plumbing, lows previously set in Q2 of 2019, a very different market when, crypto assets were really just starting to wake up from the hangover left after the 2017 bull market. And it's actually the 2017 bull market that's really the most interesting trend on this chart. If you go and look to the left-hand side of the chart there, you can see Bitcoin dominance declining down to 30%, a little bit above 30% toward the end of 2017 and the beginning of 2018. And that was, in this kind of retail-driven, altcoin-driven market. Bull markets like the one we've seen since Q4 and in Q1, at least the Q4 market was kind of, at least anecdotally, driven by institutional investors. And we saw the kind of awakening of institutional investment in the second quarter of last year with Paul Tudor Jones. Making a Bitcoin bet and other institutional interest kind of growing over that time. So what we may be seeing now is a bit of a shift, right? A sea change and a switch back to a retail-driven market. And I think we have some indications of that other than this one metric.
All right. So Galen, altcoins are outpacing Bitcoin in return today. What do you think is causing this variance we're seeing?
Yeah, I think that's an indicator, right? We talked about this a couple of weeks ago, Christine, looking at, some of the new or relative newcomers that are now outpacing Bitcoin by 3 and 4x in terms of quarterly returns. That to me is a signal of retail enthusiasm. I think you do probably have some institutional investors that are, starting to explore beyond Bitcoin and Ether. But when you start to see some of the coins a little further down, really starting to run up in price, that could be taken as a strong indication that there's, more retail enthusiasm, more retail participants in the market. So, and then on the other side of the coin, we have Link in the added to the Grayscale Digital Large Cap Fund as of this morning, right? That's Chainlink. So, maybe you do see institutional investors starting to branch out as well.
Some people fear they may have missed out on Bitcoin's rally and there is more opportunity perhaps with altcoins. Do you think that's the case?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess that's a kind of an old attitude, right? Like Apple is too expensive or something. I think it's more important to look at the market cap of the asset as a whole and think about how could it relate to what the market cap could be or should be. So in Bitcoin's case, with a market cap just over 1 trillion, if Bitcoin is indeed digital gold, gold's market cap is, I think, around $11 trillion. That's the current price times the above ground supply. So, could Bitcoin replace gold? If you believe it can, then it's got a lot of room to run. And I think, if you look at crypto assets in general, to the $2 trillion number that the asset category hit yesterday, I believe, that's an impressive number. But the S&P 500 has a market cap north of 30 trillion. So what should we be what should we be thinking about in terms of what's a real or relative good number for these things to be at?
Well, Bitcoin is the gateway coin, and once people get comfortable with it, they may venture into other altcoins. So anyway, Galen, thank you so much for joining us.
Sure. I got to say, before we run out of time, that I had the opposite thing happen to me. Ether was the gateway coin, and I went in the other way.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Always a pleasure.
Into the smart contracts, out the maxi. All right, Galen. Yes. Always a pleasure to have you.
Indeed.
Right. That was CoinDesk Director of Data and Indexes, Galen Moore. And that's it for All About Bitcoin. I'm your host, Kristin Lee. Join us tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. in New York for First Mover, your first look at the day's global crypto news headlines. You're watching CoinDesk TV.